All right, everybody, thank you very much for coming to our upcoming TC meeting briefing. I'm going to now hopefully blow my slides up so everyone can see them better. This is a new effort we're trying in the OGC for both members and non-members to give them a little heads up about what's coming up for our next TC meeting. For those of you that are new to the OGC or not members who either are going to attend or thinking about attending, this will give you a little short course on what we do in the OGC, and then talk more specifically about our TC meetings in general. So I'm going to proceed with the agenda. We're quite firm on time if we possibly can be. I will try to stick to this schedule because we do have some members that are interested in coming in after 20 minutes after we do a little bit of an orientation to talk about the other topics. So our agenda today is to start off with a new member orientation. This is intended for those of you who are new members, who are not members, or members who've sat out activity for a while and are jumping back in. You'll see some things have changed in the OGC. 20 minutes for that. We'll then step through some updates to our policies and procedures just for a refresher for some of you. A quick look back at our previous TC meeting, and then a quick look forward to the upcoming TC meeting in Nottingham in the UK. And then finally, an overview of the summit and workshop that we will be holding in Nottingham, which I think you'll find to be quite interesting. So let's jump right into the new member orientation. So what is the OGC? The OGC is a nonprofit consensus standards organization. We were founded in 1994. We have actually 515 plus members now, 48 standards, about to be augmented with 2 more in a couple of more days. So we're doing quite well on the growth of the standards with thousands of implementations and a very broad user community. As you look at our profile, our membership is split quite nicely around the globe and in various sectors. So Europe and North America have the most members at the moment, but the Asia Pacific and Middle East regions are growing at the fastest rate right now. Our membership includes commercial entities, government organizations, university and research organizations, and NGOs, and that does include other standards organizations where we have mutual membership or mutual voting rights. Again, I think a great diverse organization, and that's part of what makes us so successful and why we've continued to grow since our founding more than 20 years ago. Our vision and mission, very simply put, to advance the development and use of international standards that support geospatial activities and interoperability. So what is an OGC standard? It is, again, a consensus document that is developed by the OGC membership. Those of you that are members, you design, you build, you approve these standards. We on staff facilitate the process, but this is a member-driven organization. And we take requirements from not just our members, but the community as a whole, and we assess evolving technology trends to see if other standards are necessary. So I'm going to boil this down to 5 really simple steps, how we make a standard. Those of you who've done a lot of work in this community will recognize that this is a vast oversimplification, but truly this is how it really works, right? 5 simple steps. Identify the requirements, form a standards working group, create the standard, submit for internal review and public comment, and then you OGC members vote to approve the standard. With respect to requirements, our requirements come from a number of sources. We have our own interoperability program that I'll discuss later, where we define requirements through testing. We have sharing and data services for international purposes, operational needs, be those government or commercial, and commercial business drivers, specifically for those interfaces and metadata, as well as some exchange encodings. Those variety of requirements are brought into domain working groups. Those are working groups that talk about specific topics of interest. We'll come to those again a little bit later as well. And those requirements are assessed to whether they collectively demand the need for a new standard or an enhancement to an existing standard. Other places we get requirements are from our alliance partnerships. So we work with the IETF, OASIS, the W3C, ISO, and a number of other standards organizations, or domain industry and topical domain organizations. We typically have joint membership with these groups such that they participate in our process and we in theirs. And as they develop standards, we leverage those standards in our own. We also provide our standards back into those organizations for publishing. For instance, a number of OGC standards are now also ISO standards. Of recent work, the Web3D Consortium is perhaps our most interesting in that we have new standardized methods for describing geospatial information on the web being jointly developed by our two organizations. We have some other sources of requirements. Our standards activities derives requirements for new standards. There are existing encodings or services that an owner would like to give to the OGC for adoption, KML being a very good example, and the now CDB effort that just started. And lastly, we might have abandoned work that needs a home, a standard that is no longer being actively developed, and in some cases even no longer supported, but for which the industry needs assistance, and we'll pick those up. And so we're doing some work with LandXML and trying to determine whether a new InfraGML is the ideal replacement for that standard. Next, we form a SWG. Pretty straightforward. There's a simple 3 or 4 page charter that has to be written that describes the business case for that standards working group. Let me be very clear, the business case doesn't mean we need a profit loss statement on what you're going to do with the standard. Rather, we need to understand, is there an industrial or a research need for the standard to improve something in the geospatial interoperability topic area. 3 charter members, one of which needs to be an OGC voting member, so we do need an endorsement from someone who's very active in the OGC. And then you request a technical committee to allow that SWG to form, and that goes through a set of simple presentations and finally a vote for approval. Once the SWG starts, you create the standard. Maybe not as simple as just creating a standard, right? There's a lot of processes involved. It is not exactly a simple thing to do. It's a lot of work to build a standard. You need use cases and requirements and dependencies. We do have very clear OGC policy on how these standards have to be developed. There is an abstract specification and a modular specification with which you must comply, and you are reviewed on that as you're developing a standard. You are allowed to invite experts. So many of our standards working groups include experts from around industry and research and the university community that are not OGC members but who can contribute to the standards. So those experts are allowed to come in. Then we have a set of public reviews. There's a formal public review period at the end of the standards development process, but we highly encourage standards working groups to start public review early in their process. Early and often is always best. Those standards that had interim public reviews go through the approval process much more smoothly. And lastly, use of collaboration tools. Not only do these tools such as GitHub help you as a standards development group build a new standard, but they also provide a forum for an iterative public review and even coding against an evolving standard, as happened with GeoPackage. The standard's then submitted for review. There's several little hurdles that are not trivial in any means. The OGC Architecture Board checks for compliance with our abstract and modular specs. We have a naming authority to test URIs, and then OGC staff does a very thorough review to make sure the standard adheres to all of our policies and our standards template. And that's important to fulfill because the standards template gives all users of a standard an expectation of how information is provided and presented. Lastly, a 30-day public review that is fully advertised through a variety of press outlets, so we allow anyone in the public to review. Anyone who provides a comment, those comments must be addressed by the standards working group. Addressing a comment could mean something so significant as changing the standard, or relatively insignificant that the topic is not exactly on base for this version, and we'll decide whether we want to include that in an upcoming version of the standard. Lastly, vote to approve the standard. The technical committee votes to recommend adoption by the planning committee. I'll talk a little more in a moment about how those organizations work, but the standard must be presented to the technical committee in a public meeting. That meeting can be face-to-face meeting at one of our 4 quarterly meetings or online. The TC, the technical committee, must vote at that presentation whether to issue a formal electronic vote. And the formal electronic vote gives people 45 days to review the standard and provide back comments and a vote of yes, no, or abstain. 1/3 of our voting members must vote on the standard for that standard vote to be valid, and the standard must be approved by a 2/3 majority. Should the TC approve the standard, it's then passed to our planning committee, who looks at the standard again and assesses whether the technical committee made the right recommendation, and then will approve or not approve the standard. That's the process, pretty straightforward. Where do we do all this work? Well, this is a brief overview of our organization. Under our board of directors and senior executive staff, our president, Mark Reichert, operates the organization with the advice of 2 committees. We have a strategic member advisory committee comprising our strategic members. We have 5 strategic members in the OGC. And there's also a global advisory council that is made up of a number of advisors from our membership across the globe. These advise Mark and the board on how to execute the mission of the OGC. Underneath this piece, we have 4 major programs. Interoperability engineering, run by our CTO, George Percival. That looks at our interoperability testing and compliance. The standards program that I run, where we actually develop the standards themselves. Communications and outreach, Denise has been typing to you in the session today, and Denise coordinates not only our outreach to media and such, but also the internal workings of the OGC, such as the website and portal and all the things that make us do our business. And then lastly, our regional services representatives. If you have questions about the OGC in general, these are your go-to people for your respective regions. Talk to them. They can help navigate you through any part of the process. They know OGC inside out and can also connect you with other staff or members that might be able to assist you. So now with each of these programs, they all work together to advance the OGC's mission. The interoperability program focuses on rapid interface development and testing of interoperability. Existing standards, proposed standards, external standards, or even just conceptual ideas of how things ought to work together are tested in a number of interoperability experiments, from very formal funded test beds down to what we call plugfest and interoperability experiments worked in an in-kind basis. Those processes develop requirements that go into our standards development program. Those of us that build the standards take those requirements and other requirements and derive standards. Standards go right back into the interoperability program for further testing, so there's a feedback loop already. We then have compliance testing and certification. We build tests for all of our standards that we can, and we're working through the list quite diligently. Those tests allow external organizations who are implementing OGC standards to test and see if they are compliant with the standard. And should they wish to be certified as such, they can pay a fee and have a formal certification test process in which the product is branded with an OGC certified compliance. And then lastly, our communications and outreach program provides that outreach and that public dissemination of information about our standards so that the public can use, adopt, and provide feedback back into our standards development program or interoperability program. So as you can see, all of these cycle together and work very well together. So under the standards development program, the principal committee where we do business is our technical committee. And the reason we're having this meeting is to talk to you about our upcoming technical committee meeting in Nottingham. So we're going to talk a little more now about how the technical committee works. This is where the development process occurs through consensus. We have a number of domain and standards working groups. Domain working groups, from now on, I'm going to say DWIGs. Standards working groups, I'm going to call SWGs. So those are our, your first clue to fun OGC nomenclature. And it's thoroughly guided by our policies and procedures, which we update about on a twice-a-year basis. I'll state it's not a boring process. You will not fall asleep even when you have jet lag. I promise you'll be engaged. But it's not a beach party either. You actually have to do some work. So the middle setting is really more ideal and more what we really do. We work together in large collaboration environments. It's not just PowerPoint presented back to the audience to listen quietly. We expect feedback. We have vigorous discussions. These sessions are absolutely exciting. Technical Committee has 4 meetings a year. You can see the upcoming meetings. We just had one in Boulder, Colorado in June. We're in Nottingham and then other places. Members can send representatives. Depending on your membership level, you get 1 or more free registrations. Many sessions are available via web and teleconference. In fact, almost all of them are now. And if you are a voting member and cannot attend, please send your proxy. You're going to get an email from me later today telling you how to do so. Domain working groups, again, these run around topical domains, be they a particularly industry vertical, a topic of general interest that cuts across the entire standard swath, but they are domains that can be cohesively collected into a topic area. We have a large number of domain working groups as of today. This is our list. Our newest one is our Point Cloud Domain Working Group. We'll talk about that in our look back at Boulder in just a moment. Standards working groups are where the actual work on the standard occurs. So these groups form per the charter that I discussed earlier. They work until they build a standard, and then they either become inactive or recharter themselves to evolve the standard in the future. There are intellectual property policies in effect for standards working groups. So prior to joining a working group, you must sign an intellectual property agreement to ensure that you are going to adhere to those policies. They're clearly spelled out on our portal, and I'll be happy to work any of you through that process. A standards working group typically works 6 to 18 months, depending on the complexity of the version of the standard. This is a list of our SWGs as of today. We also have some new ones that are starting up here by the Nottingham meeting timeframe. You can see quite a number of topics you'll recognize in the list, standards that you use already, the web mapping service, web coverage service, as well as some new ones, the pipeline ML that's just started up and working with some of our other standards, GML, to develop a pipeline encoding standard. Now, every DWG and SWG has a portal page. Those of you who are not OGC members can go to our public-facing website and get information about each DWG or SWG. If you are a member, when you log into the portal, you can get information on each as well. Every DWG is available to you, this portal of information, at any time. The SWGs, you only get to see the SWG information in the portal once you join that SWG, because there are files and other information there that are protected by the IPR policies. I just want to make that clear that through our portal, those of you that are members, you can't see SWG information on a SWG to which you're not a member. Some other operating units in our standards program include the OGC Architecture Board, referred to as the OAB. The OAB works to ensure that the architecture of the entire organization and standards suite adheres to modern and best practices, but also to ensure new standards adhere to our own architectural rules. The naming authority I discussed earlier, that's for URI validation, and the planning committee. The planning committee provides guidance and oversight to the technical committee, as well as the final seal of approval on any official OGC policy document. We have some guidance documents listed here. A guide to the OGCs recently been updated to talk about how we work in general, the reference model best for procuring organizations, and those who want to understand the big picture of how these standards fit together, and then a few specifications that talk about our underlying architecture. We also have two types of position documents, an OGC standard, that can be an implementation standard or an abstract specification topic, and an OGC best practice. That's a document that discusses best practices related to the use or adoption of our standards. Those best practices do not have to discuss how OGC standards that are already published work, and in fact, in some cases, a best practice is a step before a standard. A concept is described in a very standardized fashion in a best practice. The members vote and approve that best practice, and that can evolve to a standard with work in a standards working group. Other documents you'll see from our portal that are very handy, engineering reports. These are the outputs of our interoperability program. Right now, we've finished Testbed 11, and the engineering reports from Testbed 11 are coming out at the rate of a couple of a week. And those are very informative documents of actual testing, and will give you previews of standards development work to come. Discussion paper, talking about technology or standards work. Discussion papers tend to be very technical, but they're not an official position of the OGC. Rather, they are a discussion formulated by members and or staff. And lastly, white papers, higher level topical discussions on policy, on politics, on technical issues. We have a number of white papers, one recently published on the smart cities that I have found to be very informative. In fact, I refer to quite frequently when making sure I know how all of our standards work together. One last type of document, if you will, that we use quite heavily, and that's our change request. So I request that all of you, members or non-members, go to our change request portal entry place. At any time, if you find something in a standard that you think needs a change, or if you have a suggestion for a new idea that we should research, a new requirement, change requests are really one of the best ways we can receive feedback on our current standards, as well as where we need to evolve our standards. Each change request is processed quite formally and is submitted to the appropriate member group, a DWG or a SWG, where it can be evaluated for further processing. Voting. We have a number of types of votes in the OGC. You've heard a little bit about voting already. We vote not only in the working groups, but also in the technical committee, and we do these either face-to-face or by electronic means. Working groups, typically face-to-face meetings or teleconferences. The votes can be called at the meeting. There's no notice required. Notice is required for electronic votes, however. 1 vote per member organization, and in a SWG, only a voting member can vote. I won't go into details of how you become a voting member. That's very important. Next, votes that occur in the TC plenary. We have a number of votes that occur for approval of non-position papers, approval to start electronic votes on position papers. This is just a list of all of our votes. We have 2 types of voters, that is any TC member or voting members of the TC. Those are members at a certain membership level or higher. And for electronic voting, we have a handful of processes for portal electronic votes or email votes. Portal electronic votes have a very formalized process and policies and procedures. You see them listed every time you log into our portal. They're required for all position papers and certain structural changes, such as formation of SWGs, changes to policies, etc. Email votes, we're improving the way we're describing them. I'll be on that topic in just a moment. Communications. Understand our members come from all over the world. All of our meetings are conducted in English, but you do hear a lot of languages at our breaks, and you do occasionally hear teleconferences amongst members from a particular nation who want to speak in their native language. But we do also have a number of communication tools to facilitate this. Our member portal, this is what it looks like when you log in. That's heavily used and has a moving schedule every day of what's going on in the OGC, and you can see all the votes to the right. We also have a number of email lists. This is our lifeblood of the OGC, all the email lists. 2 of them in particular you need to worry about are TC Announce and TC Discuss. Announce is typically very administrative content. When I tell you, hey, a vote's coming out, or here's some things you need to do for the Nottingham meeting, whereas TC Discuss is for more general technical discussions. Both of these are moderated by OGC staff. We also have wikis. And then a lot of our members are doing collaboration using GitHub. So that's becoming a very common method for not only development of standard documentation, but also the standards themselves. So your first OGC meeting, those of you who never attended before, make sure to register on the portal. Registration will be coming up soon. Here's a link to where the agenda is for the upcoming TC meeting. You can also go onto the external facing website, news and events, and pull down the upcoming TC information. And you can contact myself, Greg Bueller, or Denise McKenzie. Our contact information comes up in a moment if you have any questions. Typically, what are you going to do? Well, this is a look at Wednesday of our TC meeting. You can see lots of DWGs and SWGs and special meetings. There's a lot to choose from. Again, I warn you, you will not be bored. So that was an introduction to the OGC, very rapid to just give you an oversight or overview of the entire organization. Now I want to step more into some of our policies and procedures. So some quick reminders for those of you who are very familiar with what we do, and some updates of what we're doing moving forward in the next couple of TC meetings. So remember the 3-week rule. Those of you who are not members or are new members, you're going to hear this over and over and over again. The 3-week rule refers to documents that must be reviewed by the technical committee in its closing plenary. Votes are to be held on these documents. They need to be uploaded 3 weeks prior to the start of that meeting. So I issued the first call the other day. I believe it's 1:45 in the afternoon, British summertime. 3 weeks in advance of that Thursday meeting. You need to have documents in what we call the pending documents folder. The TC can suspend the 3-week policy to vote on a specific document. As the chair of the technical committee, I am not going to call for that unless it's really urgent. So I please request you to make sure to get those documents in time. Where do they go? They go to the Pending Documents tab on the portal. So when you log into the portal, click on Pending Documents. You need to request a document number for a new document. Upload your document. Please complete the metadata properly, the title, the author. If it's attached to the group, please place that there. And then all users will see the list of documents that are upcoming for discussion in our TC with a bright purplish blue bar to tell you if they're above or below the current 3-week notice. Real quick reminder, at the last policies and procedures update, which occurred early this year, our electronic voting rules have changed. All votes are now 45 days in duration. There are no extensions. The first 2 sets of major sequences of votes we've held under this policies and procedures, we have met the sufficiency of 33% by a small margin on all of the votes. And votes now allow yes, no, or abstain. All votes count. Items still must pass by 2/3 majority for a official OGC policy. And SWGs now must be approved by the technical committee via electronic vote per these rules. So SWGs still go through the formal presentation process, but we do need those SWG formation to have a vote in the portal now. New policies and procedures that are in draft right now that you'll be looking at in great detail in Nottingham. We have a standards track and email voting rules. So the multi-standards track, I've presented this a few times to those of you who are old hands at this. I'm sorry to do it one more time, but for new members, this is really important. We're looking at 2 points of entry for our standards process. What we're referring to is a community standard and then the full standards track. I'm going to describe each quickly here. The community standard, that's an internally or externally developed standard. Typically, this is something that you may refer to as a de facto standard or a standard that is very common throughout industry or academia that is not guided by another organization, is guided by another organization, may have IPR holdings. That means its intellectual property is held by another organization. These are brought in through a new voting process. There is not a requirement to use the OGC template, but we do prefer that the standards generally adhere to the OGC template or be organized in a similar fashion. There are no tests required, but the standard must be widely implemented. There must be evidence the standard is in use. Our intent is that this better promotes the use of geospatial standards to the community in general. And so many things out there that those of you can imagine in your head that are sort of becoming de facto industrial standards are well suited for this community standard. The standards track itself goes through 2 different steps. These are in fact identical in appearance to our current standard. That is, you follow the standards template, you go through the same process of forming a SWG, doing the review and adoption vote. The first level in this step is for a standard that may or may not have implementations. Yes, sometimes this is a chicken and the egg problem. You have a standard that you want to promote, but no one's ready to put a implementation together until they see it's a standard. So this lets standards get developed that we as an OGC membership collectively agree are valuable to the community, get that standard published, and then see if they become implemented and it can advance further in our process. It's a great starting point for new standards. But like a typical OGC standard, the IPR, the intellectual property, does revert to the OGC. Such a standard can then proceed to a full standard, and the full standard is in the same template. The requirements must be clearly stated, same thing as with the other. You have to follow the modular spec, but there needs to be evidence of implementation at this point. So the standard must be implemented and there must be site tests developed. This is one of the new requirements. So this is what differentiates our current standard from this full standard is the site tests are developed at the time of the standard being pushed through this process. And when it is approved, the site tests will already be in place. Again, there must be reference implementations. And this is intended to be a rigorous, mature standard with all of the elements we expect in an OGC standard. So in summary, the standards track looks like this. Community standards, no SWG necessary, but there could be one. The other 2 tracks require a SWG, and you can see the variety of other attributes of those standards. Email voting. So in review of the last version of the policies and procedures, I realized that our email voting has been a little ad hoc, to say to be polite. We're following policies, but the policies are not always crystal clear, and we don't have formulated recourse for if a no objection to unanimous consent gets a lot of objections. So the email voting language is being restructured such that we have much more clear guidance on who can issue email votes, including me as the TC chair, the nature of those votes, their applicability, and what happens if you have either a loss, a no preponderance of a hand ballot, or a no objection or an objection to a no objection style vote. So I will be socializing that over the next coming few days, and we'll be talking about it in great depth in Nottingham. I think it's important that we do clarify email votes because, frankly, they've been just a little bit ad hoc in the last few months, to say the least. Okay. Next, a quick look back at our Boulder Technical Committee meeting. So I'll talk about 5 things that occurred at the meeting: Testbed, our new point cloud DWG that stood up after the meeting, the Geosemantics Summit, tell you a little bit about the formal breaks, and I know Denise is going to put out a poll for the information on this meeting. I would also like those of you that attended the last technical committee meeting to give me some feedback on the meeting breaks, and then talk about our fancy Gardels Awards winners. So first, Testbed 11. We had a general theme of coastal inundation for this testbed, but you can see 4 major threads that occurred. Very, very significant testbed, well funded to the tune of almost $2 million. Large amount of work went into not just the execution of testbed, but a record number of engineering reports. I believe we're going to publish 31 engineering reports out of this testbed. We demonstrated the testbed in Boulder. Some interesting stats in that top photograph. We had 9 sponsors across those 4 threads with 56 components and 31 documents. I was right. 120 participants from 29 organizations, and all this work was done in 6 months. It's a really significant amount of work to occur in 6 months. Those of you who have participated in our testbed, thank you very much. Those of you who have not, at a minimum, you should observe. It's really an impressive process. It's very rapid. The meetings occur on a quite regular basis, so it's very easy to stay informed of what occurs. And frankly, these testbeds are the probably best driver we have for new standards or improvements to our existing standards. So I encourage all of you to participate in our testbed process. Point clouds, we had an ad hoc meeting on the topic of point clouds in general. I do want to be clear, it was point clouds, not specific to any type of sensor. So this meeting was intended to discuss photogrammetrically derived elevation points, LiDAR scanned, be it laser or LiDAR scanned point cloud data, bathymetric data. Chris Little from the UK Met Office gave us a fascinating presentation on point cloud usage in meteorology. Not exactly what I usually think of as point clouds, but it's identical, and in fact these are clouds of point data, with the intent to try to determine where does the OGC need to address point cloud content. For about 18 months now, our members have been asking us to look at point cloud data. In the last 6 months or so, a number of non-members or affiliated organizations have weighed in with their opinions. So as a result of this discussion, we formed a point cloud DWG. The enthusiasm in the meeting was so great that the charter was actually first drafted in only a 2-day period. Went back out to our members. We received a lot of really excellent comments, redrafted the charter. That charter was just recently approved, and the DWG has been stood up. Special thanks to Stan Tillman for leading the effort of getting the charter out. The DWG will hold its first official meeting at the Nottingham TC, where we'll start talking about scope of work. I'll just preview those of you who are on the call. We're talking about, do we need a meta standard to help us connect all the variety of ad hoc standards or adopted standards that exist in the point cloud community? Does there need to be consolidation of those standards? Do we need to look at compression or other encoding methods? And lastly, do we need to look at services? All outcomes are on the table. We also had a Geosemantics Summit run by the Geosemantics DWG. Fascinating topic. The summit was, I think, quite productive and fairly well attended. The real effort of this summit was to bring together the linked data and ontology worlds to talk in a geospatial context. The summit included not just our own members, but external people from a variety of domains that are tangential to our geospatial domain. And so a lot of discussion on ontologies. We were able to derive a bigger picture of what these ontologies need to be and how we need to relate them. So specific topics you can see here. One of the things I found to be quite fascinating was how to use ontologies in conjunction with our web services. Think about this from a perspective of data discovery, linking web services, linking non-traditional, non-structured data back into our web services. Something very important. I'll put big data in quotes, but in this world of a lot of discussion on big data and non-traditional data, this is where OGC is going to need to dip its toes to start working in the field. Breaks. We organized our Boulder meeting to have formal breaks between sessions to allow for better networking, follow-up discussion, or ad hoc discussions during the day. I received overwhelmingly positive reviews from our members who attended in Boulder. I'd like other people's opinion to weigh in. It also greatly smooths the transition between our sessions. OGC staff also are now setting up go-to meetings for every session, and we have dedicated machines in each meeting room such that those of you who are chairing a session can just walk in and start work in theory, right? You don't have nearly as much setup time to waste the first 15 minutes of your session. So yes, the breaks have taken a little bit of time out of our meeting schedule. On the flip side, we think meetings start quickly enough that the time is completely equilibrated. And lastly, we had 2 Kenneth D. Gardels Awards at the Boulder meeting. Our 2015 Gardels Award went to Paul Scarpentini of Bentley Corporation. Those of you who know Paul know that he is a tireless advocate of all things OGC and has been instrumental in a huge number of standards. When Paul reviews your documents, you get a real review. He is absolutely critical to our success and is leading our land infra work right now, where we're having what I consider to be some of our best interoperation with another standards organization, being Building Smart. We also awarded a special Gardels Award to Carl Reed. Carl was our CTO and director of the standards program for 14 years until the end of December. And before that, Carl was an active member from the initial days of the OGC. Carl's back to being a very active member. He's chairing 2 working groups already. So Carl's contribution is absolutely incomparable. Now a quick look forward to the Nottingham TC meeting. 3 things to talk about. A theme to the meeting. We'll see how successful we can be in this theme idea. A little bit more about Testbed 11, and then some unique opportunities you're going to have in Nottingham. So it's been my desire over the past year that we try where possible to have a little bit of thematic content in our meetings so that we can see if we find some topics of interest to our membership that cut across a number of our domain and standards working groups. So in this case, we're looking at volunteer geographic information or crowdsourced information. Those of you who work on the data side of the geospatial environment know that VGI content is king right now. There is so much VGI content being derived, and anybody and everybody is trying to find ways to leverage this information. It's freely available. It's also often with non-restrictive licensing terms. It has a variety of degrees of completeness and quality, but regardless of the quality, it's often better than what we can build on a bespoke basis. The University of Nottingham under Mike Jackson is already doing a lot of research on this topic, and so it's quite apropos that we have this session in our Nottingham TC meeting. The focus I have had on VGI is the relevance of a standards organization to the VGI community. So I'll say that a lot of people in the derivation and publication of VGI content find standards to be a bit overwhelming and a bit too restrictive. So do we need to flex a bit in how we build standards and how we publicize those standards and how we request they be implemented to accommodate this community? Or do we do some outreach to the community to explain to them where our standards can help or do we do a combination thereof? So this is the topic I'd like to address. Mike is going to really help us focus on the quality aspects. So not just how good, how accurate are the data, but how complete are they and how suitable are they for use in other topics. We'll kick this off with a VGI workshop that I'll come to in a few moments. And I request that those of you on this call who are chairing, and there will be a call out to our general chairs as well, if you have VGI topics that you'd like to bring into your sessions, please do, and we'll try to wrap those up in our closing plenary. Next, Testbed 11. We are going to have a repeat of the demonstration from Boulder. It's going to be Thursday, the 17th of September at 10:15 in the morning local time. So that demonstration, it will not be like in Boulder. It will not run unopposed. There will be other sessions in parallel. But those of you who are not able to attend the Boulder TC and want to see a repeat of the demonstration, we'll be doing that in Nottingham. Again, I think you'll find it interesting. It's a very great sort of multimedia experience. You've got people on stage. You've got PowerPoints. You've got videos, singing, dancing, the whole thing. It'll be a really good demonstration. I'll talk about a couple of unique opportunities at the host of our next meeting. So the Nottingham conference or meeting will be held at the British Geological Survey's Conference Center outside of Nottingham. We're going to get Monday evening some 3D virtualization demonstrations. So the BGS has very robust 3D capabilities and a data cave, and we're going to get to see geologic content, and remember, all geologic stuff is geospatially related, demonstrated Monday evening. I think that'd be fascinating. Speaking of from the point of being the former chair of the 3D Information Management Group in the OGC when I was a member, I love all things 3D, but I think you're going to find this is some of the most sophisticated, interesting 3D content you'll ever see. They also have a geological walk, which I plan to do on a daily basis because I think rocks are wonderful. Really fascinating thing at the BGS. It's a beautiful facility. I think you'll all really enjoy the location. And Wednesday evening, our reception is going to be held at the Trent Bridge Cricket Grounds. As you can tell from my accent, I know very little about cricket, as do a lot of our members. So this would be a great experience, one, to be in one of Britain's most beautiful cricket facilities, but hopefully we'll get some great insight into how the game actually works. So be sure to register early for the Wednesday evening reception. We are a little bit more limited on space than we are at some other receptions. Should be fascinating. And those of you who've not attended a meeting before, our Wednesday evening receptions are one of the best places to network and discuss general topics of interest to the OGC, but also to build a personal relationship with a lot of our other members. I find Wednesday evening receptions a lot of times to be the best place to derive my requirements for the next TC meeting to be held. I just go fish around and see what did you learn over the course of this week and what can we do next quarter to make things more interesting. I encourage you all to attend. Brief overview now of the summits we're going to hold in the Nottingham TC. Two special events. I described earlier our effort in VGI. So Monday afternoon from 13 to 14:45, we will have a volunteer geographic information workshop. And then on Thursday, all morning, there will be an augmented reality summit. OGC has co-located with augmented reality expertise a couple of times in the past, and these summits have been well attended not only by our own membership, but members of the AR community. First, to the VGI workshop, this is our preliminary agenda. This is evolving as we speak. We do have speakers for a number of these topics. So start off with just an introduction to VGI, then talk more about the relevance of standards to the VGI community. Again, this is of great interest to me. We have our own OGC mindset, which can be quite rigorous, and the VGI community can sometimes be really loose with their use of standard depictions of information, but we certainly have a lot of common ground. So really talk about our relevance and what do we need to make ourselves more relevant. Third, talk about challenges with respect to data exchange. So a lot of you probably pull data now from OpenStreetMap. How do you want to get OpenStreetMap data into a geo package? And how do you want to make sure that your nomenclature is clear? We also have a very concrete example from Cobweb and talk about the observations and measurement citizen profile with respect to data exchange of VGI content. Fourth will be challenges for data quality assessment. So this is the implications of data fusion and the propagation of uncertainty. So if you have data with a variety of, let's say, positional accuracy in the same data collection, and you transform that data and fuse it with new data, those errors propagate differently depending on how accurate the initial data was. Imagine any other scenario. A quite complicated topic, and expertise from the University of Nottingham will be here for that. And we'll talk about precision and lack of consistency, and accuracy and completeness. We often think of completeness as not being an issue when we have bespoke data because there's a specification against which we collect. When you're talking about VGI, we're not specifying the community, thou shalt connect every single river in Zimbabwe. They're going to collect what they get. And so how do we assess completeness? What kind of statistical methods are there to assess that? And lastly, we will develop a number of actions for the OGC to pursue, and we'll present those in our closing plenary. Next, our Augmented Reality Summit. That will be Thursday all morning. And this summit really has 4 major goals. Understand that the OGC has developed the Augmented Reality Markup Language, ARML specification or standard. That's our first foray really into the AR community. The AR standard is very much a OGC-like standard. It does define how geospatially referenced content can be presented in augmented reality browsers. But what's next? What are the barriers to interoperability? What new activities are relevant to our AR work? So that is not just the future of ARML, but also augmented reality standards work going on in OASIS at the moment. Discuss some of the emerging challenges, and then plan for the community's future. And that is, do we continue our existing activities or renew them? Do we charter new work, etc.? I think it'll be a great session. It's going to be led by Christine Perret from the AR community. Those of you who know Christine know that she's very dynamic and runs a productive meeting that never will end without goals and outcomes. So she's very good at making sure that we come to decisions and have steps to move forward. Okay, just to talk a little bit more about logistics. Physically present in Nottingham will be these OGC staff members, so you can find us all. If you go to the OGC website, you can even see pictures of many of us, so you'll know what we look like. But we'll be bouncing around everywhere. If you have any questions, any comments during the meeting, track us down. We can help with anything. Some final thoughts. We only have 6 weeks to go, or 6 weeks in a couple of days. Registration almost open. I don't think it's quite open, but we'll be open very shortly. Non-members are welcome to attend. There is a fee that's applicable, but please contact me if you're not a member and wish to attend. I will note that you will be able to attend most of the domain working groups. The standards working groups you cannot attend unless you are invited to. There will be a lot of information for download. Yes, we'll need a link. I have a comment here from Denise that our registration will be open by the end of the week, so we should have it open in the next couple of days. And again, email addresses for those of us organizing the meeting, and you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. Now, I purposely worked to give us a little bit of time for questions at the end, but I also see I have a note here that Andrew Hughes with the BGS wants to speak briefly about the hosting of our next meeting in Nottingham. So I'm going to turn over to Andrew. For all of those of you online, I apologize. I can't hear anything on this session. I'm just rambling without being able to hear. So I'll request that someone on our staff let me know when I need to speak up again. So Andrew, over to you, please.
Okay, so if I can just, if you could share the screen, I'll just pop up, go through some quick slides. Thank you. I'll just so I'll just run through briefly. I mean, I'm going to Scott, you provided us a great introduction to the site and what to expect. So I just thought I'd take you through really what you might like to see when you're here. And I think a lot of, as you'd expect, we've got a lot of rocks and a lot of old rocks, not literally in geological age, but also in terms of discovery. So we have things that were discovered even before Darwin began his work, and is an example of Darwin's mentor discovering fossils down in Dorset. Where to be absolutely accurate, we're about 5 miles, about 8 kilometres outside of the centre of Nottingham. There's pretty good bus links to get there, and a lot of the hotels and accommodation is available in the centre of Nottingham, as is the cricket ground for the Wednesday evening meal. All of these details can be found on our website. The web address is at the bottom there, bgs.ac.uk. This morning I just thought I'd take you or this afternoon really, take you through a quick tour of the site. So an overcast day, perhaps a portent of what you might come to expect in September anyway. Here's the reception for registration. We have the geological walk, which takes you through from Precambrian all the way through to Quaternary. I thought I'd just do this, quickly go up to give you a flavour of what to expect in terms of the site and how it looks. And we've had quite a lot of work done in the last 3 or 4 years, and the site is really looking quite nice. William Smith building and the James Hutton building there. In terms of the facilities, Scott kindly mentioned our data cave. This is our 3D room, which we'll kit out in cinema-style seating for the duration of the TC, so you can all welcome to come in and use it. The screen, as you see, is at least a couple of meters high by a good 4 or 5 meters across, and it's really good quality. In terms of exhibition space, and it's where posters and or the lunch will be served. We have quite a large and well-lit exhibition area with, of course, the glass cabinets full of fossils, as you'd expect for a geological survey. We also have, importantly, lots of rooms and areas where you can undertake side meetings, work using Wi-Fi, and so on and so forth. And again, the site's been refurbished in the last 2 or 3 years, and it's looking quite nice. Finally, just leave you with a quick image of the main meeting room, the Zalabesh room, and to say thanks very much for all your inputs, and we look forward to welcoming you to the site in September. That's all I've got to say.
Okay, great. Andrew, thank you very much. I wish I could have heard it, but I saw the slides and that was excellent. I'm just going to make my own little commercial here. I'm a geologist by education and original profession, and all geologists consider the BGS to be one of those holy sites to which we must periodically make a pilgrimage. Awesome bookstore, so go buy stuff from them. It's a really cool place. I can't wait to go just be a geologist for another week. Okay, so I want to address a let's see, we can see fix my screen. Sorry guys, thanks. You're not seeing what you want to see. Let me show the other screen. Apologize folks, there we go. So I want to handle a few of our questions here really quickly. We've got about 5 more minutes in the seminar. First, we had a question, how can I add new members to the portal? I'll give you a great tutorial of that. Just catch me offline, ssimmons@opengeospatial.org, or give me a ring. It's pretty straightforward, and I'll show you how to do that. Second question, would GeoTIFF be appropriate for a community standard? That is an excellent example. Now, GeoTIFF is moving through a regular standards process, but it is an example of what's ideal for a community standard. Widely adopted, could use a home for its evolution, and certainly to say that it's well implemented is an understatement. So there are gazillions of implementations. So yes, a very good example. You can imagine many others out there. If it is a commercial sort of de facto standard like CDB, the commercial entity needs to bring it to us, and that's what happened with KML under our old process. But in the more in the newer process that is proposed, something like KML would likely have come in first as a community standard and then gone through the full adoption process. I have a question about thread and component, And so this refers back to our test beds. In general, a test bed is organized around a topic to which all of there are different perspectives in which we address the problems faced by that general topic. So in the case of having a coastal inundation scenario, there are issues with respect to emergency response, with respect to prediction of evacuations, with respect to weather forecasting, aviation control around areas, etc. And so those variety of different perspectives on the problem set are organized into a larger thread. So there was an aviation thread, and that worked with not only the need to get aviation assets into or out of the disaster area, but also the need to do notice to airmen, that is the notifications that certain airspaces are open or closed, the in-flight routing of aircraft, etc. So there's a lot of aviation components necessary to deal with a flood response. So the threat is that bigger sort of perspective into the giant topic, and then the components are those specific elements. And so aviation being another example is how do we exchange information, geospatial information, such that the notices to airmen go out appropriately in the format that those airmen expect to see the notice, but are still linked back to the geospatial extent of the problem area, and can be shared with other people who need to know about restricted flight zones, etc. So the component is just a subset of the thread. And hopefully that's clear. Let's see. And do I have any? I think one more question. So very good point. The Nottingham TC meeting is partly in parallel to Intergeo in Stuttgart. Yes, unfortunate coincidence this year. And can we have some influence on what day a DWIG meeting is? So this is specifically with a request to the point cloud, but it can also go to other ones. Yes, so contact Greg Bueller and myself about any constraints. We still do a little bit of what we call horse trading on the schedule and can move sessions around and shuffle a bit. But please do so as soon as humanly possible. I have the request now. We'll look at this one to see if we can move it. I request that you do it as soon as possible because a lot of people have already started planning their travel, and people that cannot attend the full duration of the meetings might already have planned travel around certain sessions they need to attend. So we're not going to move too many much more. I'll just let that be stated, but please, as soon as possible, let me know if you need some shifting. And with that, I have all the questions. We have a poll. So please let us know if this webinar was helpful to you. And please feel free to email me and any of the other organizers. We've not done this type of a session before. There's a few kinks we want to work out. I will admit, I think I probably had just a little too much information for our new member orientation, because we will also have a new member orientation face-to-face at the Nottingham TC. So we're welcome to suggestions, organizational changes to this meeting, splitting it into two types of sessions, one for new and non-members and one for existing members, etc. So we're open to all suggestions. Like I said, we've never done it before, but we're really trying to give everyone as best a preview as possible to our upcoming TC meeting so that you are all better prepared to attend, or if you can attend, you can submit requests to those of us who are going to be there or to staff to have certain topics covered or get summaries. So again, anything we can do to help you make more of your TC meetings is of great benefit to all of us in the OGC. So with that, I thank everyone for your attendance. I will mute myself. We'll leave the line open for a while. If a few more people have some questions, I'll kind of keep watch on the sessions, the questions, and try to answer you one by one. Again, thank you everyone for your time. So I'm back online. If I think I had a question, if you're still online, about where can we get information about the coastal inundation testbed on the OGC portal. There is I'm sorry, on the OGC public website, there is information on the testbed itself. The engineering reports are still being published, so if you are an OGC member, you can go into the portal and either find those in pending documents, but they're all in pending documents, those that are ready to be published, and you can at least get a preview of them. As they're published, the majority will be made publicly available and will be present on our public website. If there's any particular topic you have great interest in, let me know and I'll track the document down. But every report, at least in draft stage, is now in pending documents on the OGC portal. They don't all have common naming nomenclature, so they may take a little digging to find. And I'll note there was some earlier questions from a number of people about sharing the slides, emailing the slides. Yes, we will make those available. They're already on the OGC portal. So if you go to the Nottingham meeting folder, in the root of the Nottingham meeting folder, there's not much there, but these slides are there. So if you're an OGC member, they are available to you now on the OGC portal. If you're a non-member, we will make these available. Okay, well, if we have no more questions, I'm going to stop sharing and drop off the call again.